William Branham, A Prophet Visits South Africa by Julius Stadsglev. Preface. The writing of this book has a threefold purpose. First, David tells us in Psalm 105 that we should make known his deeds among the people. God did many great and wonderful deeds in South Africa through the ministry of the Branham Party. Oh, for words to express what he did in South Africa those last 3 months of 1951. But human ability, even at its best, could never fully portray the signs and wonders which God wrought in our midst. One writer, making a report of some of the meetings, said, "One would like to have supernatural words to express the supernatural ministry of the Lord among the people." As I write to you about what I saw God do in South Africa, I feel like the writer must have felt when he tried to describe the love of God and could only say, "Could we with ink the ocean fill, and were the skies of parchment made? Were every stalk on earth a quill, and every man a scribe by trade? To write the love of God above would drain the ocean dry, nor could the scroll contain the whole, though stretched from sky to sky." David had seen God work in the midst of his people, and as he meditated upon this, his every other expression was, "For his mercy endureth forever." Psalms 136. This forever included our day and age. Yes, his mercy endureth forever. It endureth for the most influential businessman in a thriving South African city. It endureth for the most insignificant native in a segregated African reservation. The first time that a supernatural voice spoke to Brother Branham, it came out of a whirlwind. This is the same way the Lord spoke to Job, that old patriarch of early ages, according to the 38th chapter. There are so many unusual similarities between the life and ministry of William Branham and that of the Old Testament prophets that there can be no doubt in any honest mind that he is a prophet of God, just as Elijah, Elisha, Isaiah, Jeremiah, and the rest of those who have been recognized as prophets of God. Knowing therefore that truly God did marvelous deeds in South Africa, proving again that his mercy endureth forever and working through a prophet in our day, this is written to make known his deeds among the people. En route from Johannesburg to Klerksdorp, the Branham party traveled in 2 different cars. At one place, we stopped to take advantage of an unusual scenic view. As I stepped out of the car, Reverend A.J. Schoeman, chairman of the National Committee, came over and said that Brother Branham wished to speak to me. After exchanging a few remarks with the various ones there, Brother Branham turned to Brother Bosworth and myself. He told us that the angel of the Lord had told him that a report should be written pertaining to the meetings in South Africa, and that it was my responsibility to do this. Thus, in the second place, this report is written in accordance with the request of the angel of the Lord. The third purpose for which this book is written is that God might be able to speak to you through it. As you read some of the highlights of William Branham's early life and the gift that operates through him, may you too realize that he is a prophet of God. Therefore, the message that he brings is not from man, but from God, who forgiveth all thine iniquities, who healeth all thy diseases. Psalm 103, verse 3. As you read the typical service, may you take the truths to your own heart and claim the things for which God has paid the supreme price, the death of his only begotten Son. May the testimonies be a living example and an inspiration to you to believe God. God's universal laws established faith in him to be the most powerful force in all the world. It isn't attending Brother Branham's services. It isn't obtaining a prayer card which enables one to enter the prayer line. It isn't being prayed for by any one person that brings healing for your soul or healing for your body. It is only accepting Christ and his finished work on Calvary, accepting his promises and clinging to them with a faith that wavereth not. Having done this, only believe, only believe. All things are possible, only believe. Jesus said I not unto thee, that if thou wouldest believe, thou shouldest see the glory of God? John 11, verse 40. Chapter 1. Who is William Branham? William Branham was born on a farm near Burkesville, Kentucky, not far from the place where Abraham Lincoln was born approximately 100 years before. No one is sure of the exact date because no birth records were kept in Kentucky in those days. However, it is believed he was born on the 6th day of April 1909 and weighed only 5 pounds. His mother was 15 years of age and his father 18. The first day of his life, something very unusual happened. After the midwife had washed him and placed him by his mother, she went to a window to open the shutter. There was no glass in the windows in the Branham house in those days, and the air and light was regulated by the opening and closing of the wooden shutters. Dawn was just breaking over the fields, sending a few rays of light into the room. With this light came a small circular halo, about a foot in diameter, which shone with brightness above the bed where the mother and baby lay. This halo has since been seen by thousands of people, and is no doubt the same one that shows in the photograph taken in Houston, Texas during the January 1950 campaign. A report of this photograph with a photostatic copy of the statements made by George Lacey, U.S. Examiner of questioned documents, will be found at the end of this chapter. When the midwife and parents saw this halo, they began to cry. They were afraid and did not understand what it all meant. Not until many years later did those who knew about the halo understand that God had his hand on this man for a great ministry to the people of the world. Religion in any form was not taken into consideration in the Branham family. His grandfather had been a Catholic, but his mother and father apparently gave no thought to Christianity. But because of this unusual incident that happened at his birth, his mother took him to a neighborhood Baptist church. This was his first visit to the church and the last one for many years. In the early fall of 1909, Kentucky experienced one of its worst snowstorms. At this time, William Branham's father was away working in a lumber camp where he was stranded because of the severe storm. Soon the supply of food and fuel at their home began to run out. His mother would go outside and bring in anything she could find to burn in order to keep her child and herself from freezing to death. They never had much food on hand, and when their meager supply was gone, she could feel that her strength was leaving her. Help would have to come shortly if they were to live. Finally, she became so weak that she realized if she went outside for more wood, she might not be able to return. She took the baby and wrapped him the best she could and put him to bed, waiting for death to come and take them both. They would have died had it not been for a saintly old neighbor of theirs who became strangely concerned about the Branham household. Upon investigation, he found there was no smoke coming out of the chimney. Although the snow was deep, the elderly man made his way to the humble clapboard shingled cabin and found that the door was locked from inside. He realized that there must be someone inside, and seeing no sign of heat in the cabin, he broke in. He was startled by what he saw when he entered. The mother was near death because of cold and starvation. He prayed that God would spare their lives and not permit this young mother and child to pass from the world this way. Quickly he gathered firewood and stayed there until he had a good blazing fire, which soon warmed the humble little two-room home. Next, he secured food for the mother and child, and soon they were on their way to recovery. Not long after this, the Branham family moved to Utica, Indiana, and the following year to a farm 5 miles out of Jeffersonville, Indiana, 2 miles from where he now lives. His early life was marked by tragedy, poverty, and misunderstanding. Some of the most vivid memories of William Branham's youth are pertaining to the poverty in which they were forced to live. His father worked for a wealthy farmer for 75 cents a day. He recalls seeing him come home with his shirt stuck on his sunburned back so that his mother had to take the scissors to cut it loose. Their humble home was a little two-room cabin with dirt floors and the kitchen sink out underneath the apple tree in the yard. The first time that God spoke audibly to William Branham was when he was about 7 years old. He had just enrolled in a rural school a few miles north of Jeffersonville, Indiana. He came home from school that afternoon and was intent on joining the rest of the boys in some fishing. But as young Branham was about to leave, his father called him and told him that he would have to carry water for his moonshine store. This, of course, was a disappointment to him because as a boy he was very fond of hunting and fishing. But he realized that since his father told him to carry water, he'd have to do as he was told. While carrying the water, he stopped to rest under an old poplar tree halfway between the house and the barn. Suddenly, he heard the sound of wind blowing in the leaves. He looked around and realized that it was a still, sunny, warm day. Listening more intently, he noticed that in a certain place, about the size of a barrel, the wind seemed to be blowing through the trees. Just then, a voice came out from the trees saying, "Never drink, smoke, or defile your body in any way, for I have a work for you to do when you get older." This frightened him, and he ran to the house. Crying, he fell into the arms of his mother, who thought he had been bitten by a snake. He told her that he was just scared, and did not tell her about the wind blowing through the leaves, nor about the voice. His mother put him to bed, thinking he was suffering from a nervous shock. Whenever possible, he would avoid going near that tree, choosing rather to detour around the other side of the garden. 2 weeks later, as he was playing on the banks of the Ohio River, he saw a vision. He noticed what appeared to him to be a bridge coming up from the Kentucky side of the river, over towards Indiana. As the bridge was progressing towards Indiana, he saw 16 men drop from the bridge into the water. He went home and told his mother about this, but she said that he had been sleeping and had a dream. But young William Branham knew that he had not been sleeping or dreaming, yet he did not understand what he had seen. 22 years later, the municipal bridge was built between Louisville, Kentucky and Jeffersonville, Indiana, over this exact spot. During the construction of the bridge, 16 men lost their lives. God was speaking to the young man and laying the foundation for him to have faith in the things that God would show him in the future years. He was conscious of the fact that there was somebody around him who seemed to always want to talk, but he, having been warned by his mother of spiritualism and demon powers, was afraid and always tried to ignore it. To add misery and sadness to poverty, his father became a drunkard. William recalls how one whole year he went to school and never owned a shirt which he could wear. He remembers how at school he sat and looked at the other children who had clothing and began to realize that liquor had stolen from his family the necessities of life. He read about Abraham Lincoln, who as a young man got off a boat down in New Orleans and saw white people auction off a large Negro, separating him from his family. His wife and child were there crying as the man was being sold as if he were a horse. Lincoln realized this was wrong and vowed that someday he would do something about it even at the price of his own life. In like manner, young William Branham sat there in school and thought of the poverty that his family was experiencing because of liquor. He said that this was wrong and he was going to do something about it someday, even at the cost of his life. He has not forgotten his vow, for even to this day he does and will continue to do everything he can to enlighten people as to the damaging effect of liquor and tobacco. William Branham tells about the time when his teacher, Mrs. Temple, asked him why he did not take his coat off in school. He couldn't tell her that he did not have a shirt, so he told her that he was chilly. She said, "All right then, go over and sit by the fire." Of course he had to do as she told him, so he went over and sat by the stove. There he was warmer than ever, and although the perspiration was running down his back, he still could not take his coat off. She could not understand it and asked if he wasn't warm yet, to which he replied, "No, ma'am." Finally, she concluded that he was getting the flu, so she sent him home. Although he did not mind going home from school, he could not help but cry. In order to hide the fact that he did not have a shirt like the other children, he had lied to his teacher by telling her he was cold. Finally, he did get a shirt made from an old dress one of his cousins had left at his house. He cut the skirt part off, but it still did not look much like a shirt. The other children laughed at him, saying he had a girl's dress on. Again he lied, saying, "No, I haven't. That's my Indian suit." But they didn't believe him, and he went home crying.